Hi, this is Mark again, back to show you a bit more about EigenD and a bit more about how it's open and extendable. So in previous videos we've been showing how we can use Midi and basically control VSTs, etc. for it. But actually EigenD is a lot more than just Midi. And in particular, internally, it actually deals with signal flows that are far higher resolution than Midi and also at faster rates than Midi. So what I'm going to do though is actually show you how we can interface Midi devices into that high resolution, and then we can actually start getting some of the more benefits of EigenD. In particular, I'm going to start simple with a keyboard to show you the concepts of what I've done. But then I'm going to go on to using MIDI voice per channels, which could be used with alternative controllers. And I'll show you a few various controllers along the way whilst I do that. Okay, so we're going to start simple at the moment. So first of all, I'm going to actually show you the keyboard working through EigenD. But this is actually not a VST, this is actually a software instrument. It's actually a cello from, from SDK. So it's a physical model. I'm not going to play it very much or very well because I've only just put it together. Okay, so now what we've actually got here is we've got the keys here, and these actually, at the moment, this is just when you hit the keys. That's like a plucky type sound. But we've also got on the mod wheel, I've actually also assigned the bowing action, so we can do things like this. So we can go. Bit crunchy. That's partly because I'm actually not used to using the mod wheel for the bowing action, which you have to be smooth and you have to change it to. And then partly also because MIDI is actually, well, certainly from this keyboard, is only 7 bits, so we've only got 127 values. So it's a little bit crunchy, but we could actually do this with other controllers as well. So what I'll do first of all, before we go to the next stage and show you a different controller, so I want to show you a little bit about how this actually works. So what I will do is I will bring up Workbench again, and this time I can show you a little bit more complex setups. This is something I've already obviously prepared. Now it might look like a little bit of a rat's nest, but actually it's fairly straightforward. Over here, we can actually see that we've got the instruments. And this is something new that we didn't show in the other videos. They're contained within so-called rigs, which we'll have a look at in a minute. And then on the other side, we have the MIDI input coming from, in this case, Virus. And we have a brand new agent, which I've only just written, called Midi device, which actually converts those MIDI messages into the underlying messages that EigenD uses. Now, we'll come back to that in a minute. And then we go through a so-called key group. Now, key groups actually here it's not doing very much particularly. What it actually allows me to do is quite a few different things. It allows me some switching functionality. So, for example, in here, I can, if I bring up stage, oh, there it is. If I bring up stage, I've actually got 4 different devices here. So for example, if I switch to the synth, oh, actually I've left both of them on, but you can see I can switch devices. Usually I would do this via the controller itself, because also these things have a full switching functionality, but I'll show it in stage because it's a little bit easier to see visually. And then we can see what's actually happening. All these wires here are all just actually interconnecting. I've actually got 4 different MIDI input devices, which I'm going to show you today. And then we can see the MIDI input 1 is connected to the MIDI device. The MIDI device is connected to the key group, and then the key group is connected to each of the 4 instruments. So actually it's not as complicated as it seems, because the reason we've got lots of wires here is they're obviously all interconnected to all of them, because that's how I like my setups. And then on the left-hand side here, this is very, on the right-hand side, this is what I've already shown you. This is the console mixer, which actually mixes in the various different instruments at different levels. And then we've actually got an audio unit here, which I'm using for Haller's vintage verb to give us some reverb, and then it's going out to the audio. So nothing very different from there. And then if we actually look inside there, we can actually see what makes up the cello. And the cello is actually made up of a number of other instruments, which is going to load for me. And here we can see this is the input into the so-called rig. And then we've basically got something which shapes the breath, which actually I wasn't showing here. The scaler is interesting because this is what actually converts the keynotes into frequencies. And then we've got the cello oscillator itself. And then we've got a usual setup over here where we've got a gain and with something, and then we've got a convolver on here. If I look at another rig, like the clarinet rig, we'll see a very similar setup. So this is just a way to actually contain all these instruments separately aside, and then we can actually reuse them from different parts of the keyboard, etc. So I can use this from all of my devices. Now, what I was going to show you actually, which is actually what's coming out of the Midi input devices, is actually the same as this that's coming into this gateway. So we've actually got the same as we have on an Eigenharp, which is basically a couple of strip controllers, pedal inputs, the key input itself, which covers which key's been pressed basically, and what that musically means. We can relay out entire keyboards. I could, for example, make this keyboard follow a blues scale or whatever rather than a chromatic scale. And then we have the pressure that's done on the keys. Now, obviously, with a MIDI keyboard like this, it's fairly limited. It only has channel pressure. But when we start getting into more advanced controllers, we can actually have pressure per key. And we can also similarly have so-called roll per key, and then also yaw. So we have 3 dimensions to a key press, basically. And then we also have breath controllers and all sorts of other things. But the point is is that here, what we've got is we've got a continuous signal flow. So these are no longer MIDI messages. So what I've actually done is convert them from MIDI messages rather, in this MIDI device, into various Eigenharp messages. Now, just one point. I mentioned strips, etc. This is really actually more convention. Eigenharp EigenD rather doesn't care anything more about strips or keys than it does anything else. They're just basically signals. But by convention, we tend to name them as keys, roll, yaw, strips, and breath, just so that we can have some compatibility between the agents. And inside here, if I look at this MIDI device agent, this is still working. This is experimental for me. But we can actually see things like breath control here indicates the MIDI channel that it's going to, sorry, the MIDI CC it's coming in on, and various criteria about that. And we've got the same with strips. This MIDI device also deals with high resolution as well. And if the channel is 0, it's not in this case, but if it's 0, that means that it actually works as MIDI per channel, which means any of the CCs coming on strip, on the yaw, roll, or pressure can all actually be per voice. Okay, so enough talking. I thought I would just show you a little bit of what's going on. So now I'm going to show you something a little bit of fun. So again, now this bit definitely cannot play. If you thought I couldn't play that, I'll wait till you see this. So here, I have a lead motion controller. And I also actually have a copy of, I hope, Gecko running. So what we can actually see here is if I move my hands in Gecko, we can actually see that we've got some input going on. Now actually what I've got is I've got my right hand here is volume. So my right hand is volume. And my left hand is actually note. And I've also got pitch bend here as well. I'm going to just turn it off. Now, that's a bit of fun, really. Bit like a theremin, but not quite. So what if I wanted it to be a little bit more like a theremin? Could I do that? Yeah, very easily. So this is actually on Midi input 2 and comes into key group 2. And we're actually using the clarinet, which again is another SDK model that we have, so another physical model. So what if I wanted to instead actually have it so it's a bit more like a theremin, so it's got a continuous tone? Okay, well I can do that fairly easily. First of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to first of all turn around and tell that I don't want the leap motion. I want to ignore what the leap motion is doing for the notes, and I can do that by simply turning off the notes control on here. Then what I want instead to do is actually to deal with a pitch bend. I think by default I've got something like a 12 or 24 semitone pitch bend on it. Now what I'm going to do though is, rather than just have it so it's on like that, I'm going to actually make it so it's switched from my foot pedal, which you can't actually see below here. So the way I'm going to do that is, first of all, I'm going to take off the key control from the leap motion, which is key and pressure. Okay, now I'm going to create a new MIDI input device. I could find MIDI input. Okay, there we are. So first of all, MIDI input. Now that I'm actually going to, while I remember, change it to soft step share. So this is actually my soft step's going to actually be an input on it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another MIDI device here. So this is the thing that does the translation, remember. Yeah, MIDI input is where the input's coming from. MIDI device is the thing that's doing the translation. Now I'm not going to connect everything up on this one. I'm actually just going to connect up on here the two things that I've just removed, which is the key input, the key output rather, which I'm going to put to the key input, and the pressure output, which goes to pressure input. Easy enough. Now if I've remembered everything, which is possibly not true, what should now happen is nothing happens. Oh, okay. Nothing happens at the moment because I've not got a note on. But if I actually press a note, nothing happens. Like I said, the reason for this is, one sec, let me have a look. I'm going to bring here, mouse trigger, okay. Got it wrong. So up. Sorry about the audio levels. Okay, I'll try to take those down a little bit, I think, later. Okay. So anyway, you could see fairly straightforward. I just forgot to tread on the pedal. So basically what that did is it, as I say, we basically, all we did there was actually just to bring in a new MIDI input, which was the pedal, and then we could actually use that to actually give me the trigger for the notes. And then I could just use the other device entirely for pitch bends, etc. So you can combine devices as well, so you don't have to use them all independently. That's actually quite important because the first example I was doing with the keyboard, let's get this out of the way because it has a habit of screeching if I leave it around. Okay. Yes, with the keyboard, obviously the mod wheel wasn't particularly comfortable, but I could use the leap motion, for example, to do the bowing action or anything else. Now, third device. So what's my third device I'm going to bring to you? Well, the third device I'm going to bring to you is an iPad. Okay, loads of people have one of these. And I'm going to actually use something called ThumbJam. Now the reason I want to use ThumbJam is actually supports voice per channel. Now that means that what we can actually do is we can move beyond the limitations of Midi, where I press a key and that's all that happens, to actually something where I can actually use some expression. Now to do this, what I do have to remember to do is just set up my network connection. I've actually got two things going on here, so I actually want to be a bit careful here. So I'm going to connect my iPad. Okay, so now if things are working correctly. So I've got ThumbJam here. Now you're not going to be able to see this very well, but so we can actually hear it. This is good. This is a good start. Now the thing about ThumbJam though is, so if you can see here, you can see it's actually got a horizontal. So across here we have the notes, and then we also have a vertical axis, which you can hear is obviously changing. I think the cutoff, I think, has got it changed to. That's also good, and also because it actually also supports pressure control, which is a kind of vibrato pitch bend thing. Now the interesting thing is, which I'll have to put it down to show you, is I can actually press more than one key at a time. So now I've got one down, but so you can see how there the cutoff was actually changing, was becoming brighter on one note but not the other, and I can do that with as many devices. And I can also do pitch bend on two notes. So for example, if I hold one note steady, you can hear that only one pitch bend. And that works for as many fingers as I can do it with. So that's quite interesting. So that's the first voice per channel. And this is very interesting because this is exactly the technology that the Eigenharp uses. Well, okay. The Eigenharp and Haken Continuum and Soundplane and the soon-to-come Linnstrument all suffer the same problem, which is that they need to talk to the outside world via Midi. And to do that, to get expressive control with more than one finger at a time, then they need to actually use a Midi channel per finger that's actually pressed down. And then we can actually send CCs per finger. And that allows us to do, and also pitch bends per finger. So that allows us to get the expression we want. So it's a pretty common mechanism to be done. So this little demonstration shows not only that it can obviously work with ThumbJam, but also can work with the Linnstrument when it comes out, Soundplane, and also the Eigenharp, which I'm going to show you in a second. And also, I forgot one, I said the Soundplane, the Continuum. The only other alternative is OSC, which I'm also considering implementing as well. But first this one. So now, oh, my dog's awake. Final experiment. Okay, so what I'm going to actually do is actually turn off that session, and I'm going to turn on this session and connect. I think, God, I shouldn't have let my laptop go to sleep. That's a bad move. Okay, now, okay, so now what I've actually got going on here is something interesting. So I've actually created another network session here. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring in Brazil. Oh, it works. Excellent. Right. The reason I'm choosing Brazil is fantastically, a couple of days ago, UHE released Brazil itself is still in beta, but they released a new version of it, which actually supports voice per channel. So this is an audio unit. it supports voice per channel. So what we need is an instrument that supports voice per channel. I could do that in the ThumbJam, but of course I've got an Eigenharp. I'm not going to use that one, because that was too big. I'm going to use this one. Now this one is actually connected to my laptop here. Yeah, see it? This is actually connected, and this is actually also running EigenD. So, as I said, Eigenharp, like the Haken and the Soundplanes, etc., they all have to support voice per channel because that's the only way that they can actually, well, it's the standard way for them to actually talk to external devices to get some expression. So, what we can do is we can actually use an instance of EigenD on a completely different machine, send it via the network to actually test voice per channel on the same machine. So here it is, and I've got, as you can see, many wires. This is actually a converted version of Land of Brazil that someone released, Sam Bai, I think, in the Brazil competition. And I've modified it a little bit to have more wires, in particular, so it supports aftertouch, polyphonic aftertouch. So the mod wheel is actually going to be used as well, and also the, what else? Oh, I did have, I've lost it now, okay. I did have the expression as well, but I think I've lost that. Okay, so now what we can see. Oh, okay, I can't imagine. I can't do this. I should have put the harness on. Okay, let's put it now. Now this is actually responding. I need to actually write a better patch actually. I know what I did. I forgot to save the patch. That's what it was. This actually is responding to breath, mod wheels, etc. That's all coming through here. We can actually see how this is configured inside EigenD here. Basically, the sideways movement of the Eigenharp of the Pico is actually mapped to the mod wheel, and the breath controller is mapped to the breath controller input. And these can then be taken in. If we look down at the bottom here, we can actually see the same inputs that can come into Brazil. So for example, we can connect up, which one did I do it to last time that made some difference? I can, for example, connect up the breath here. And now, we can do this with many things. We can connect. This is the great thing about the modular. Let's just check we've got. Okay. Anyway, I'm not going to get taken up enough of your time. So, what we've shown is we can use this to we can use EigenD. We can actually connect into its underlying control structure. Now, this actually also opens up all of the switching capabilities, the talkers, the arranger, which is like a step sequencer, the recorder, and many, many other features. Things like the scaler, which I kind of showed but didn't explain very much. All those things become available to all the devices that I've shown you here. And we can either use that with simple one-channel Midi stuff, or we can use it with high-resolution Midi and voice per channel things, ranging from an iPad to I've lost the leap motion, the leap motion over there, and the Pico. But also, if I had one, I could show you connected to the Linnstrument, Soundplane, Haken, and whatever else comes as well. Anyway, so I hope that's useful, and till next time.